Good morning again. This is Sonia Sutton. I've not had the pleasure yet of meeting or hearing our first speaker today, the Rev'd Barbara Cawthorne, but I immediately knew she was a wonderful choice for opening the conference when I read her reply to my inquiry. I asked if she would be willing to speak to the membership and told her that many of them were somewhat traumatized by the shifting sands of this work that we do during this pandemic. Her words back to me meant, for all of you, were, "Even now you amaze me. I never in a million years expected this new way of sharing music would be satisfying, but it is. You are even smarter than I thought you were. It's been hard, but you've done it, and you've done it so very well. Let's celebrate your achievement under circumstances none of us would have chosen. Certainly we can gripe about the hard parts, but let's rejoice that you have proved yourselves equal to a daunting task." Thank you for those words, Barbara, and for being here today. The Q&A function will be open during this session so that any of you watching can ask questions, which Bishop Alexander will read and combine as needed before posing your questions near the end of the session to our speaker, the Reverend Barbara Cawthorne.
Hello all. I am so happy to be here, and thank you, Sonia. I was thinking this morning about, of all people, St. Clare. Why? You know, you saw that movie, Brother Sun and Sister Moon. If you didn't see it, you should watch it again now because it has not aged well. And it's really a silly movie. But one of its premises, I believe, was that Clare was Francis' girlfriend. She was not his girlfriend. She was always a person who aspired to a deep spiritual life, and she knew about Francis and his remarkably deep and ascetic spiritual life. And so her relationship with him was that she contacted him and wanted him to include her, let her lead a group of women in a similar life. And so it was that kind of love that they shared. But there's another thing about Clare that was making me think of her in connection with this conference, and that is that you probably know this. Clare is the patron saint of television. Why? Well, when she was sick and couldn't go to Mass, she could see it on the wall of her room, much as you see me, and much as we're seeing each other, and much as we see church in our televisions for the past year and a half or so. She is the patron saint of television because she was given a vision of something that was happening, but at which she was not physically present. Patron saint of television, and therefore I nominate her. And it must certainly be true that she is also the patron saint of Zoom. It requires a pope to actually make somebody a saint of something, but surely the television thing grandfathers her in, I would think. What a year it has been. A stunning change in everything for you and what you have done. It's been amazing to me. Of course, I'm easily amazed. I've always been amazed by you musicians. I have always thought and have said publicly many times that I suspect that you are from another planet, that you are not human in the same way that I'm human, because there are things that you can do that I cannot even imagine. Choral directors, singers, organists, you're not supposed to be able to do the things that you can do. All of those manuals and all of those stops and your feet going too. It's stunning to me that there exist such people who can summon forth from within themselves this ability. I say not really human, maybe from another planet. But the fact is that, of course, you're human. You are simply humans to whom God has given astounding gifts. I know that you and others who knew you when you were young, they probably noticed this gift right away, and they steered you in the direction of people who would husband it and help you grow in it. And I've heard gratitude already expressed today for some of those teachers and some of those mentors and those companions on the way. You knew already at an early age what you brought into the world, and you made it your business, and those who loved you also made it their business to seek out those people who would help it flower more and more. And you've always been amazing. But this year, you were dumbfounding. It was more than remarkable. It was unbelievable. You you showed yourself the way Claire saw the mass on her wall. You showed yourself on people's computers. You showed yourself on people's phones. You sang duets with yourselves sometimes quartets with yourselves. It was so remarkable to see um, the same face singing in four parts all at the same time. It made me wonder, wouldn't it have been fun if, just in order to make the quartet seem a little bit, you know, not the same person, you could just do that? No. Maybe you could do that. No. Well, you could do a lot of things. Maybe just give each one in the quartet a special look. How you did this, I do not know. As I stumbled to find out how to even get into a Zoom meeting, you gave us such beauty, and it was completely unexpected beauty. A service without music is, was it Hobbes who said that life was, the poor was nasty, poor, brutish, and short? Well, a service without music is, I don't know if it's nasty, poor, and brutish, but it's short and it's sad. A service without music is a quiet thing, and we need a little bit more noise in our lives, and very quickly. uh, so quickly that people with hair the color of mine were stunned by it, although there are many members who still have their original hair color and do computers a lot better than I am. But I know that a lot of you people had the same horror of Zoom that I initially did, but you conquered it right away, and you did it so well. You may have experienced, as certainly in the parish that I've been attending, we experienced just a newly awakened awe of our church musician. He It was just stunning. Both of them, the choir director and the organist. She working at her home on her home organ, once in a while on the organ at church. We were just so grateful to them, and the ways in which they fulfilled our hunger to worship in some semblance of what it used to be. The ways in which we realized that we ourselves, though not musicians, um, were dependent upon this beauty to lift us up. The church has a lot of ways to lift people up, and we use them all. So, some people are lifted up through the intellect. Many people are lifted up through good works. Um, but many people are lifted up through beauty, lifted up higher and higher toward the very throne of heaven. A person who has been trained to perform as a musician uh, is very familiar with what it means to want to go higher, to want to improve, want to get better. The very word performance For people who are not musicians, sometimes people will be negative about, oh, well, this is not a performance, this is worship. Yes, it is. It certainly is a performance. Why on earth would you want it not to be that thing that summons the very best that who you are, of who you are, and offers it to God? If that is not a performance, I just don't know what it is. Your very best performance of your sacred duty. My hope is, my belief is that the awe that you have inspired in your people for being able to do this crazy thing and to do it so well and to do it week after week, all the while that you were experiencing the same isolation and fear and perhaps bereavement that all of them were experiencing as well, that you were able to use what you know and to use the beauty of what you do to stand on its shoulders and reach up and touch at least the hem of the robe. Wonder what it's going to be like now. I hope they remember how wonderful it was. Do you remember? Some of you were playing and singing in churches around 9/11. Yeah, we remember that. Remember? All of them came, didn't they? All the people were there. The churches were filled for, a matter of several weeks. And they were so grateful for what you gave them, for what we all gave them, even for the sermon. They didn't mind that. They they knew where they needed to be. They needed to come close to and sit with others who were coming close to the comfort, the deep comfort that God was offering them in the midst of that challenge. Boy, that was different from now. Back then, they were all there in church. It didn't last too long, but it was wonderful while it lasted. Now, of course, they weren't in the building. Back before we realized that surfaces were not as big a factor in the transmission of this disease, we kind of didn't even want to let people in the churches. We're afraid maybe the prayer books had gotten cooties from the virus. Now it's pretty manifestly airborne, almost exclusively, and so, but still, we remembered that one of the very first super spreader events that got national attention was a choir rehearsal. And all of us saw the writing on the wall. Uh-oh, are we ever going to sing again? Are we ever going to sing again in church? What's it going to be like? Are we going to be deprived of that? And your answer was, no, you're not going to be deprived of it. I'm going to find a way to do it in a different way. And you did. Now, as we open back up, as in some places people are in church and in other places they are creeping back in different ways, as we begin to glimpse the greenery of another new Pentecost season, that long green season of Pentecost, which I used to think was so boring. Just green, 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 nothing but green. And then in August, nothing but bread. And I thought, oh gosh, when is it going to be over? Give me some nice purple again, something that will have some narrative to it. Now, that green, that long green season, it just feels so glorious to me, so gloriously ordinary. Even though we know that things will not be, they're not going to be ordinary in the same way. We'll have a new ordinary. It'll be remarkable. And we don't yet know how. What we have learned, what you have learned, certainly is, I hope, a deep acknowledgement of your own gifts and your extraordinary devotion in finding ways to offer those gifts to us, even in the face of what we have experienced. So I guess you're not going to be singing quartets with yourself too much longer, or maybe not at all. Maybe already you've got quartets of choir members. Maybe you've got people singing outside wearing masks. Maybe you're finding ways to do things. I know you. You may not be from another planet, but you are not like other people. You know things that we do not know. You can do things that we, in our wildest imagination, cannot do. I so admire you and love you. I have always loved to be around musicians. When I served in Florence, oh gosh, it's about 12 years ago now, we received a Willis organ. So of course the Willis company came over and like organ builders do, they brought their stuff and laid it all out on the pews. And because I had an enormous, gorgeous Italian rectory, they stayed with us. And every night I would make them dinner, and they would sit around and they would talk about, well, what they'd done during the day. And what did they talk about during those meals? Those people who had been building an organ all day? Three guesses: organs. They were so single-minded, so able to focus on what was the job at hand for them. They were created to do that work. I was listening to a program this morning about Schubert, and golly, he was 31 when he went home. That's so young and so prolific, such a young person. And he said to somebody, maybe in a letter to somebody, he said, I was created to compose. He knew who he was, young as he was. He had always known who he was. He had always been singled out by others and knew himself to be singled out. We're not all Schubert, and God willing, all of us will live longer than that. But you are singled out you're set apart. We might say that you are ordained to this service of music that you offer to the church and to the world. I am wondering how prayer has managed for you during this time. Your work is prayer. Your work certainly is the facilitation of prayer in others. But it can be hard for church professionals to find themselves in prayer. We critique ourselves sometimes, don't we? We say things to ourselves like, "Oh, you don't even believe any of this stuff, do you?" Oh, well, you know what? Maybe part of you doesn't. That little devil that sits on your shoulder, but a bigger part of you does. And you can say to that one who is giving you an ugly voice, who is giving you oh, your work isn't going to ever be rewarded. It's never going to be. You half the time you don't even believe it yourself. Well, maybe some of the time there are moments when I don't believe, but there are many more when I do. And I am not going to pay attention to that moment when I don't believe. I'm going to pay attention to the moment and the moments and the moments when my belief flowers. I suppose that the decision to pray really is a decision. We know that Anglicans, we just love gorgeous words and gorgeous everything, but we do know that in the stillness of the heart, that no words are necessary. And it's probably true that in that deep silence that contains all sound and none of it, we don't have to worry about what we say, and we don't have to worry about what we hear. God enters into each of us, and mostly we don't feel it, but sometimes we do. I pray for you that you will feel it more and more as we re-enter and as you love your people again and as you let them love you again. And as you deal with all of the things that we deal with when we're working with churches, that you will know that God enters you constantly and is always, you are never absent from God. And I pray that you will know that always and experience it in your work and in your play. O God, whom saints and angels delight to worship in heaven, be present with your people who seek through art and music to perfect your praises on earth, and grant to them, even now, glimpses of your beauty, and make them worthy at length to behold it unveiled forevermore. Amen. Well, I think that's enough out of me. I am wondering, and it may be that Bishop Alexander will have a word for us about that. If there are any comments or questions that you would like to share, questions or comments or remarks, we'll find a way to get them before people.
Barbara, we've got a couple. First of all, it'd be interesting to know that at what point you had sort of an epiphany moment or an aha moment with respect to music and singing and the church. You know, often as clergy, we sometimes feel as though we are in some sort of tension or perhaps even competition with our musicians. But what about that moment when as a clergy person you sort of had that aha moment, realized that music is important and this is a joint venture to do great ministry?
Well, certainly I've always loved it and I've always known it was important, but I want to remember a time when I had the most wonderful, I've had a lot of wonderful music directors, but this man, Carl Watson, was our organist choir master. And every season he would take the initiative. He would sit down with me and we would go over, he was very organized, most of you are. And he'd have all the books out, things that we could look at, all of the lessons out, everything for every season. So we'd sit down at the beginning of each season and we would go over what we ought to do and say, what music we ought to do. He always had suggestions for me. And it was, those were one of the happiest times of my entire, it's now 41-year career as an Episcopal priest. Because, it was so, well, it was safe and it was so expert. And I knew myself to be in the presence of someone who, knew more than I did and was willing to put all of that knowledge right before me to use. And also I knew that I didn't know as much about his work and his literature as he did. Because, he didn't know as much about preaching and stuff as I did, but it was just such a treasure. And I loved, we'd spend, a couple of hours in there. It was in his office. And I can still see when I would walk into the office and see all of those worship materials lined up on the table. We had such fun. And I hope that you all do have fun with your clergy. And if you don't, well, it is actually their job, not to make sure everybody has fun, but it is their job to respect all of the people in the church, and you are one of them. It's their job to make sure everybody who works in the church works to the best of his ability. And I've certainly felt that responsibility, and it was one of my greatest pleasures. Ordinarily, when we give away power we get a lot back, a lot more back than whatever we gave away. So I suppose that one of the things, and there are clergy listening to this, I know, um, it's wrong not to want to give away power. You always do better when you do. And here is an example of it. Someone who knows so much more than I did and was so willing to share it with me. So that's just that when I think about moments, that's the moment I remember so happily.
Well, thank you, Barbara, for that. And another question that's come our way is that despite all the wonderful encouragement and pastoral care that you gave us during your address, there are many among us who still would feel some sort of numbness. And of course, being able to make music again, it's itself going to be healing. But wondering if you had any counsel on shall we say, non-musical spiritual practices that might help us as we make this transition back to in the direction of some sense of normalcy.
What a good question. My husband just died, and I've been working with a grief counselor. And one of the things that we have learned together, she knew, and I knew it too, but I kind of didn't get it or didn't apply it to myself. You have to feel your feelings. You have to, are you feeling nervous, scared, angry? Who knows what you're feeling? But you have to just acknowledge that that's the case. And it has much less power over you the moment you say its name. The moment you say you're sad, your sadness is eased a little bit. The moment you start to cry, your crying is almost over. Did you know that really when people say, oh, I cried all night, you didn't cry all night. You probably only cried for a couple of minutes. Now, you may have done it 25 times through the night, but you don't cry and cry and cry solid aria of sobbing for 8 hours. You cry very briefly, and it's a kind of a powerful muscle relaxant for the body. And I hope that none of us are too cool to cry about something that's sad or that's scary or that's hurtful. We've been apart from each other for so long, and maybe don't remember some of the tensions that have arisen or used to arise back when we were getting on each other's nerves in person. So I think it's important for us when we're acknowledging our feelings of fear and anxiety and even giving rein to crying about them, to remember that all of us, we have one great high priest, and it isn't the rector, it's Jesus. And he has firsthand acquaintance with frustration and fear, and he knows just what it's like. And so we can turn to him in a way that may seem childish. But if it does seem childish to you, I think that's a good thing, because does he not say that we have to receive the kingdom like a little child? So, what does a child do? A child asks for what we need. And so rather than trying to fit yourself into some prayer routine that somebody you admire does really well and you wish you did it better, or something you're supposed to do, maybe we should just turn to him and say, give me the gift of prayer you want me to have. And you ask for a Volvo, you might not get it. You ask to win the lotto, you might not get that. But if you ask for the gift of prayer that God wants you to have, you always get it, because that is the thing that God also wants. God wants for us to be in touch. And so in a way that may seem, kind of unworthy of your sophistication and your, somewhat beneath your education, say, give me the prayer you want me to have. And then sit tight and listen. And it's going to come to you. It might be the thing you expected. I very much wanted to be faithful in the daily office, and I wanted to be faithful in it like a machine, but I wasn't. And I was already being Mother Crafton and going around being pastoral with people, and I still wasn't. And when I did that, when I said, give me the prayer you want, give me the prayer you want me to have, I received it. And I received the daily office. Did I receive it like a machine? No, I received it like a human being. So I miss sometimes. And I don't have to make up with the readings so I don't lose points or anything like that. And we are the same. We are not the only people in the world that God doesn't want to talk to. There's not a person in the world God does not want to relate to. And it doesn't even matter what your faith is, not just Christians, all of us. And so we can trust God to give us the prayer that he wants us to have. And it may be different from what you had before. The thing that you loved before may be kind of dry to you now. So yeah, go ahead and try something new. But there will not be nothing for you because you were not called to nothing. You have been given a tremendous responsibility because of your tremendous gifts. And with that goes the power to perform them.
Thank you so much. Our time with you has come to an end, unfortunately, but we so appreciate your words of encouragement and support and love and care that you have shown to the musicians you've worked with and to our group gathered here today. And thank you, Bishop, for fielding the questions. And so thank you again for being here.